if you're starting out in property, what sort of advice would you give somebody about kind of tricks, hacks, etc., to really understand the planning process? Because I know a lot of people that I meet can be a little bit scared of planning and all the intricacies around planning. So how would you simplify it?
So planning is a process, really. And the best way to look at planning is don't be scared off from it in terms of its own set of rules. It's really there as a vehicle to help to release latent value in what you're doing. So really where you are probably looking to start is not actually, ironically enough, with planning itself. It's looking at the strategies that work in your area from a value and investment point of view, and then thinking, well, what do I need in order to tick the boxes for planning or other rules that help to get me and my scheme from point A to point B?
Right.
So would it help if I give you an example about that?
Brilliant. Love an example.
So super. Well, one example would be, let's say you're in an area where it works particularly well to do HMOs. Right. So to buy...
So for anyone listening on a HMO...
An HMO would be it's called a house in multiple occupation. So this is where you may have a family house that's occupied by a family at the moment, maybe, say, 3 or 4 bedrooms. And in that case, you are looking now to try and buy that house, do it up, do works to it, and then have up to 6 people live in it and rent it out. They might be students. They'll essentially be unrelated to each other.
Yep.
They might have their own rooms, possibly with ensuite bathrooms to them, or they might share bathrooms or toilets, but they'll share typically one particular amenity or facility within the house. So usually a kitchen or a dining room, all that sort of stuff as well. So that is a house in multiple occupation, and you can have larger houses in multiple occupation, which are usually 7 or more people living there, or you'll have smaller ones which are 3 to 6 people living there as well. So you're looking to do that, and because it's multi-let, you get more rent coming in. So more rent usually means higher value, means higher profits, and you're on your way to becoming a property developer, property investor, etc. So with houses in multiple occupation, you are looking to see how it works in the area. You'll be trying to test different strategies out. You'll be looking to speak to agents in the area to see what the stock of those houses are, and whether or not you've got tenants and you've got people in that area who are likely to want to live in those units as well. And if once you're there and once hopefully you're getting some good positive feedback from these people, then the next person you probably want to go and see is somebody at the council to speak to them, to see how they feel about this from a planning point of view as well. So there are different levels at which you'll need to speak to the council and different officers, but one of the first things you'll want to be able to understand is, will I get planning permission, if I need to do so, to go from this single house to a house in multiple occupation occupied by 6 unrelated people?
So you're taking a single let house and turning it into a room let house?
Yes.
Multi-let?
Multi-let.
In most parts of the country, I know you've focused on 6 people, and I know why, and we'll share with the audience in a minute what happens over 7. But when you apply to the planning department, you're looking for a change of use, I guess, from the use class?
That's right, yes. Yeah. So with a single let, or if it's occupied by a family, it falls into a use class we call Class C3. So it's self-contained family accommodation. They're all occupying, living there, usually as a family together. Okay, so if you're then moving to non-family accommodation, what happens is the accommodation is based not on the house as a whole, but it's based on a room-by-room basis. Because if you get a family who's living there, and if they say they were renting out that property, they are paying a rent based on the house as a whole. If you rent out on a room-by-room basis, then obviously the rent will tend to be lower than what perhaps somebody's paying as a rent for the whole house.
Yeah.
But you're receiving that lower rent 6 times over. So the total rents that you're receiving over 6 rooms might very well exceed what you'd get from renting it all out to one occupant or one family for the whole house.
Yeah.
So that's the incentive in doing it.
I've done personally quite a few HMOs, and when I started years ago, I thought all you needed to go from a single let to a HMO was a HMO license and to speak to a HMO officer.
Yes.
For anyone listening, I meet a lot of people who think, the HMO officer said it's okay, they'd give me a license for HMO in that area.
Yeah.
Is that enough?
No, that's not enough, I'm afraid. That's not enough. Because often what happens is, let's say you're talking about a house where it's going to be occupied by no more than 6 people.
Yeah.
So remember that we just said that the single house, the single let, as a family house is in class C3.
Yeah.
You go to multi-let for up to 6 different people, let on a room-by-room basis, it's now a C4 use. So you go from C3 to C4. Now, within the law, you can go from C3 to C4 without needing planning permission. So there are different departments within the local authority. There's building control, there's planning, there'll be environmental health, there'll be the housing team as well. And there are all sorts of other different departments
like conservation
as well.
officer.
Conservation officer and so on and so forth. Absolutely. So we're talking about just the planning department as well. And the thing is about the law, particularly with local authorities, there is a different set of rules that each separate department has to follow. And they don't often talk to one another.
I was just going to say, if you apply for a HMO officer, I'm sure the HMO officer will tell planning you've applied, right?
They don't always, because they're only really concerned about doing their job 9 to 5, 9 to 6, following their own set of rules. And so sometimes what happens is you make that change, and you might have done so without needing permission if you needed it.
Yeah.
And then you'll get the people who live next door, you get the curtain twitchers, and they make a complaint to the local authority. Then it goes to the planning department, and the planning department then have a set of officers called the planning enforcement officers, who then start sending you letters or making calls. They investigate who's the owner, they find out you're the owner now, and they say, we've got reports that you've done something you shouldn't have done in planning terms, and therefore we need you to change the use back again. And that can cost tens of thousands of pounds if you spent money on refurbishment,
especially if you put en-suites in every room.
En-suites, you've done all that work, you've got to rip it all out, you've got to start all over again. And all sorts of other rights within the law that you might lose as a result of having to do all that. Now, the typical and the understandable reaction of anybody who's in this position, never been in it before, would be, well, hold on a second, the planning department say I've done something wrong, but the housing department, I had a housing officer come down here the other day or before I did it, I showed them the plans and they said it was all right. Sometimes you need a licence from the council for these sorts of rooms and this kind of strategy if you go above a certain number of stories or you have above a certain number of rooms. That aside, just putting that point aside for the time being, you would have been in a situation where you have one officer from another department, not in planning, from a different team, within housing say, that's okay, because they looked at a different set of rules. They looked at the Housing Act rules. And you can be okay within the Housing Act rules, but still not have complied with the planning rules. Yeah. So this is the difficulty of being a developer and being an investor and looking at these sort of strategies, that you have to have clear in your mind, what are the requirements that I'm going to have to meet if I want to do this? So I need to think about what I have to comply with in terms of building control, what I have to comply with in terms of housing or licensing, and it's actually some of the building control stuff will be part of the housing or licensing stuff. And what do I need to comply with in terms of planning, okay? And it's worth finding out what these are before you go into it. Don't try and learn on the job. Get some training, get some education, speak to people who have done this before. Perhaps if it's your very first one, seek to joint venture.
Yeah.
Joint ventures are hugely important, really valuable, because you may be giving up some of your investment pot, some of your return to your joint venture partner, but it's always better to earn something and learn rather than to try and be greedy, earn everything, and then find out you're going to be hit in terms of costs and you'll lose your investor relationships and undermine confidence in yourself afterwards. We travel fastest when we go alone, but we travel further when we go with others.
Yes.